When this morning's guest speaks, it's from his head and heart. But when he talks, it's from his soul. Who is he? You'll find out coming up next on All American People. Good morning. Welcome to All American People. This morning we're at the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce on Main Street in Conway, South Carolina. We're focused on people in our community. And we're visiting with Dr. Robert Guffey, the pastor at First Baptist Church here in Conway. Good morning.
Thank you, Greg.
Do you mind if we call you Bob?
Please do.
I think we got that early on.
We did.
The chamber was kind enough to let us in early this morning. Have you been here to this facility? It's incredible.
It's a great place. It's a great place, and it's just across the street from, if I might point, just across the street from Churches Assisting People, which is a great ministry point in Conway that many of the churches are part of.
Yes.
And it shows, I think, the heart of Conway, that Conway cares for people.
Oh, very definitely. Churches Assisting People is what? Is that something that's
been around for a good while, and they help people with food, families with food, and particularly in the economic environment we've been in the last couple of years, they've had a lot of demands. But they do a great job, and it's a great sense of partnership. And again, it's a sign of, I think, a lot of what Conway is about, is people working together to do something good.
And the great thing is, it's the first thing you see if you're entering Conway.
That's right.
Cross over the Main Street Bridge. Either you see the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce.
That's right.
Or you see
You're going to see Town Hall, you're going to see the church steeples, you're going to see a community that cares about people.
Speaking of this community, Bob, how long have you been here in the community? Did you grow up here?
No, I didn't. We didn't know Conway existed until 2005. You don't know what God's got in store for you in my line of work. But boy, has it been a great thing in our lives to be here. So since 2006, actually, when the family moved here. But upon moving here, heard from one of my wife's uncles who told her that her family actually came in 1780.
Oh, come on.
They got off the boat from Scotland at Kingston then and made their way up to Marion County. They were Carmichaels.
This was one of your wife's
That's
uncles.
Right. That's right. So occasionally when I first got here, I would say, some would say, "You are new, aren't you?" I would say, "Well, I am, but my wife's family came in 1780.
I love it, Bob.
It's true. It's true.
That gets them off a little bit.
There you go.
We had a guest last week who aired last Tuesday, actually, who opened up the interview, mentioned something about this date, 1/11/11 is the only time in the next 100 years. And it just caught me off, so I'm sure you get them with the Marion comment. And I'll mention that to Ann Powell, who'll be with us tomorrow.
Please do.
She lives in Florence, but she's from Marion.
Well, they were a bunch of Presbyterians, and one of them founded the Marion Presbyterian Church.
Is that right?
So I guess we've fallen away as Baptists.
What a great connection. Yes, and you mentioned the family. Obviously, you are married.
Right. That's right.
Do you and your bride's name is?
Angie.
Angie have child?
Well, we have a son who is 30 and has 4 children, including twins who are 6 months old, and then a daughter who's is 22 in law school in North Carolina.
Congratulations!
So we've been blessed when it comes to family.
A good 8-year gap there.
That's right. That's right. Not exactly planned, but it's worked for us.
I love it. We won't touch that. We'll let Susanna know that.
That's right.
You know, we think about, obviously, we've only got about 20-some minutes here, so I want to get into the heart of some of the questions. And obviously, ministry is such a critical piece of all communities.
Right.
Is this something you've thought about
Absolutely.
Your whole life? Is this something you'd wanted to go into?
So I think I would say from very early on, you know, you talk about callings in ministry, and when you're young, you may not know what your calling is, but there are events in the world or experiences you have that touch you in special ways. And so for me in my life, my father was a minister, my father-in-law was a minister.
Your wife's father was
My wife's father was a minister.
Yeah.
And seeing how they interacted didn't so much say, I want to do that, but it said, you know, I have some of those gifts, and the way I interface with the world seems to fit there. I'm really big on people being able to make connections, particularly people who are different. You know, God created to make us all different in some way. How can we make connections? And ministry is one of those places that can happen. It can be abused. It can be a divisive thing. You know, we hear voices that use religion in, you know, very divisive ways. But for me, God's intent is to bring people together, make the connections. You know, how are we connected to God? and how we connected to one another.
And if folks ask you what's their favorite part of being in the ministry, would it be just that, bringing people together? Would
absolutely. It's seeing relationships happen. It's seeing, you know, it may be a church in the Northeast that I worked for at one time, traveling down to Mississippi and working in the Delta. It may be folks who are working post-Katrina in some difficult places. It may be folks from different socioeconomic places in life, different races, different backgrounds, coming together and finding commonality and celebrating. It's exciting.
And celebrating that commonality.
Yeah, it's exciting.
That must be. When you think about, we go back, is it 8.5, 9+ years back to a time?
Yes.
Am I correct that I saw and reading a little bit about you, Bob, that you
Yes.
had some experiences
That's
in
right.
the Northeast at a very critical time in
That's
America?
right. 7 years in Connecticut, serving a Baptist church just outside New York City. On September 11th, there were 9 men from our town who died in the towers. There was a young family in town on the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. And I got a call from essentially our mayor, the first selectman of our town, and was asked to be on the crisis team, the response team. And we met that afternoon and began talking about how do we work, you know, what do we do? Our fire department was headed to the city. What do we do? How do we help families? So it was very real and very in front of us, and a real privilege to be a part of what was a terrible time, and we're still dealing with that.
Oh yeah. That's probably a pretty challenging part of the ministry, making sure that folks are still able to think about God when they're going through catastrophic things. Would that be, I mean, or is it tough times that make it challenging to be a minister?
Yes, well, and I would say it goes both ways. The Sunday after September 11th, attendance was higher than Easter, you know, and people are looking for answers.
Right.
And one of the answers is we don't have all the answers, but we've got to find ways to respond that we believe reflect, as Christians, Christ. How do we heal up the wounded? How do we respond? You know, what's the point of mercy as well as justice? You know, how do we protect those who can't protect themselves? Yeah. You know, and it's a challenging time because it's one of those moments people are listening. And do you really have something to say?
You know, speaking of those hard questions, that's a good opportunity for me to highlight y'all's website, firstbaptistconway.us.
That's right. I call it .us.
.us. Well, I like that better.
Yeah,
that's
I like
right.
that. But
.us. Right. There were a series of tough questions that probably a lot of folks thinking about, should I go to church, or what do I wake up for, looking for in my day? I mean, there were a lot of tough questions.
That's right.
Answers are tough, but you just highlighted one of the critical, or the critical answer.
That's right.
The critical answer. It's a good opportunity. Folks need to take the time, if they've got internet access,
to
go there. What are some other things they'd find on the website?
We'd invite them. They'd find information about the programs of the church. They'd also find, like many churches today, we have sermons and worship, that kind of thing.
Yes.
We also have some links of how do you get involved. You know, we're really big at First Baptist on connecting the importance of worship with the importance of service in the world. They go together. And so whether it is to work for CAP, whether it is to be with Habitat for Humanity or the Shepherd's Table, or to think about going to Haiti, or to work in parts of our country as well as our state and area, how do we connect up? They'll find ways to get involved.
Well, there is some tremendous info on there. And you mentioned our services. Do you have just more than one service?
That's right. 8 years ago, the church, which had been seen in current vocabulary as being very traditional, felt a call to begin a second service. Well, they have a traditional service and then a contemporary service. The big difference in those is going to be the style of music, and there's creativity in both and excellence in both, but you'll have a little different approach to the music.
Now, do you have a lot younger audience in the contemporary service and an older and the more traditional?
It's been interesting to watch that, because early on my assumption was, being at least at one time one of those younger people, that we might there might be a big difference, but we have young people in both, and we have some older folks in both, and it's good. Have more children in the contemporary service. Which
really good.
Which is good, but the average age is pretty close on each one, and you'll find something to challenge head and heart in both services.
That's great. That's great, Bob. Have you found anything? Has there been any? Obviously, you had a father who was in the ministry, a father-in-law in the ministry. Have there been some helps locally? Maybe a couple of things that have helped you locally as you and Angie and your family moved to Conway. Have there been things joining First Baptist Church
Sure,
that have really
sure,
helped you out?
Sure. Well, I would say one of the most important things, if you feel a calling to ministry, you want to follow it, you want to get your good education, and you want to dive into work, because there is no substitute for actually being in the church.
Right.
Excuse me. In our case, I learned a long time ago, be discerning and be prayerful about where you go. Is it the right church? Some folks, I think, particularly when you're young, you get stars in your eyes, and is it the big church? Is it this church? Is it, and you're supposed to go to the church where you're supposed to be. Be in the right place, and no matter the challenges, you'll be okay. I would say the greatest help for me is that I married well.
You out-married yourself.
That's right, I did.
As I clearly did.
I did. And Angie is a wonderful a servant of God in her own right, and tends to, where she is, children follow. But also in coming to Conway specifically, I love the diversity of our church. We are a Baptist church. At the same time, we have a little bit of room for, Baptist, I think, for us is an adjective, and I might call Christian the noun. We've got Baptist heritage, but we also have some ways our Baptist heritage has pushed us that may not be common in all Baptist churches. We have men and women serving equally as deacons and things like that, because we believe it's in the Bible. So, we do that. We're Baptists, we do the Bible. But coming to Conway, I was particularly struck, particularly my first Sunday back in 2006. Very first service, seated down on the, I guess the front row, if I remember right, there was a delegation of retired black Baptist pastors.
Oh, come on.
And I thought,
first Sunday.
on my first Sunday, and I thought, wow, this is, I'm all into connections, and people getting together, and I talked with them afterwards, and they said, oh yes, we're here in honor of one of your former pastors, Dr. George Lovell.
Ooh.
And Dr. Lovell had, at a very difficult time during the civil rights movement in our country, had reached out on all sides, had taken some knocks for that, had gotten a few threats for that. Here in Conway, Dr. Lovell.
Impressive.
And was here for a long time, and I would say Dr. Lovell's one of the saints of the church, and he set a good model. And he showed who First Baptist is, and other folks in Conway. We want to reach out, get to know one another, and be united, not separated by things that might separate us on the outside.
That's tremendous, Bob. Well, that must be a challenge at times, reaching out,
yes.
Getting folks into a church. How
yes.
do you,
yes.
for our viewers who may not
sure.
attend church regularly
sure.
or may not
sure.
get out, what is a way to get non-parishioners or folks who may not be interested in going to church? How do you overcome that challenge?
It is a big challenge, and even within the church, we're not a small church, we're a good-sized church, and that means even within our own congregation, we have many people who have different needs at different times. If you're in need of pastoral care, if you're sick, if your family's gone through a difficult time, you may not be physically able to do some of what we usually think of as service. Right. But there's ways we need to serve within the congregation, folks. And there are times when folks fall through the cracks, and we hope that within the ministry of the church, we pick up on that. We know how to minister within. But outside the church, how do you bring people in? It's a big question. And how do you bring them in? I think as I work with adults, most people who struggle with going to church either don't go because they weren't taken as a child,
right?
So there's no sense. They went to a place where they felt, as a friend of mine in Texas says, bruised, battered, and bored at church. Or they have faced a challenge in their life. Maybe it was an illness. Maybe it's disappointment at another church. Maybe it's just dealing with personal illness or suffering, and they're not sure how God and God's love and all that talk about grace, how does that fit into the reality of hurt in your life? So we have to address and deal with that, and how we do it is through relationships. Be real, have integrity, build friendships.
That's great, Bob. Last Thursday we had a guest on the show, Jim Beaudry, who's the manager and funeral director at Myrtle Beach Funeral Home and Crematory. And of course, in talking to him, I figure out during the interview, that's a 24/7 job.
Yes, it is.
It is
yes,
available
it is.
at all times when a family calls and they're in need.
That's right.
I can't think of many other professions other than maybe the ministry. There's probably a handful of others that I'm not thinking about right now, but this is a 24/7 position for you. Your parishioners may need you for
well,
things
if someone
like that.
calls, you don't say, my partner is on call this weekend.
That's right, yeah.
You know.